Today we're going to look at multiplication properties. This is a lot like the addition properties with one exception. But there are three multiplication properties that we're going to look at today. So we're going to just get started. Well, a coach had 16 players in each of two groups. Each player scored 5 goals. Find the total number of goals scored. So we're finding 16 times 2 in parentheses times 5. Since you can easily multiply 2 and 5, we're going to change the way the numbers are grouped. And the way we do this is using the associative property of multiplication, which states that the way in which factors are grouped does not change the product. It's easier to find 2 times 5 than it is 16 times 2 for most people. So you can group the numbers differently to find 2 times 5 first. So instead of having it grouped with 16 times 2 times 5, we're going to group 16 times 2 times 5. Okay, so 2 times 5, we should all know, hopefully, that equals 10. Okay, we all should know that 16 times 10, whenever you multiply times 10, you're just going to add a 0. So 16 times 10 is going to be 160. Okay, so that's a whole lot easier than figuring out 16 times 2, which is 32 times 5. And I have to think about that. I'm not going to do that as in my head like I can if I do 16 times 10. Okay, so that's the associative property. That's the first property. Okay, the next property we have is the commutative property of multiplication. Same as the commutative property of addition states that the order in which the factors are multiplied does not change the product. So 35 and 5/10 times blank equals 17 times 35 and 5/10. Well, that blank is going to be 17. So we know that because it doesn't matter what order we multiply, it's going to be the same. So the missing number here is 17. Okay, so that's your commutative property of multiplication. And the last one is the identity property of multiplication, which is a little different than the identity property of addition. In this case, the identity property of multiplication states that the product of any factor and 1 equals a factor. In addition, it's anything plus 0. But this one's anything times 1 equals that factor. So 17 times, this number would be a 1. 17 times 1 equals 17. Okay? So if we look down here, we're going to draw a line. Go ahead and do this. Pause it and do this and see if you get them right. Okay, so you're just changing the order. 6 and 2/10 times 100 equals 100 times 6 and 2/10. So that's going to be commutative property. Here we're just changing the way it's grouped. So that's going to be the associative property. And in here we're taking it times 1, so that'll be the identity property. So hopefully you got those all correct. Okay, next page 425. On page 425, okay, if we look at this, now we're going to use properties. So to make this easier on ourselves, we're going to take and we're going to group this together and group this together. Okay, so instead of it's going to be 5 times 1/10 times 2 times 50 in parentheses. So we know that 2 times 50 is 100, yes. Okay, so 5 and 1/10 times 100 is moving the decimal point 2 places. So if you move the decimal point 2 places, going 5, there's 1, 2, we add a 0, so our answer is going to be 510. Okay, on the next one, okay, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to regroup, I'm going to put 4 times 2 and 5/10 times 6. Okay, I know that 2 and 5/10 plus 2 and 5/10 is 5. So I do that. If I do that another 2 times, that would be 10. So I know that is 10. And then that's 10 times 6. Well, that is obviously 60. Okay. All right, now do the next 2 on your own and see if, pause it and do the next one on your own, see if you get these right. Okay, if it was me, I'm going to group these 2 together. 50 times or 500 times 10 is going to be, or times 2 is going to be 1,000. Okay, I know that 9 and 8/10 times 1,000. I know I'm just going to going to swoop over 3 because there's 3 zeros. So I go 1, 2, 3. Nothing above this swoop, add a 0. Nothing above this swoop, add a 0. My answer is going to be 9,800. Okay, remember, never take anything away. You may add zeros, but you don't never take anything away. Okay, now for this one, I'm going to group those together. So it's 1 and 4/10 times 50 times 20, which is also 50 times 20. 5 times 2 is 10. Add the 2 zeros, so it's 1,000. Once again, since it's we're moving the decimal point over 3 places, we're going to go 1, 2, 3. Nothing above there. We're going to add a 0 there, making that 1,400. Okay. Now go ahead and do this bottom part. Okay. Go ahead and figure this out, and then we'll come back and we'll decide after you pause it. Come back and see if you're right. Okay, that's 1. So that 19.5 times 1 equals 19.5, which is the identity property. Okay. 34 times 65 equals 65 times 34, yes, which is just moving numbers around. So that's commutative property. Okay. This next one down here, 2 and 1/10 times blank equals 4 and 3/10 times 2 and 1/10. So it's going to be 4 and 3/10 because that's what we're missing. Do that a little better. Okay, which is the commutative property. And here you got 17 times 2 times 5 equals 17 times 2 times 5, which is going to be the associative property. Okay, if you have any time left now, you're going to go ahead and you're going to do the problems on the back on page 426.